What's up, guys? It's Wally, and today we're going to be continuing our series talking about different Tera type Pokemon that we encounter and how to make them competitive. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a normal Tera type Palossand, which honestly, until we'd encountered it, I hadn't even thought of. So we'll get into the video, but before we do, as always, if you guys are new here, just haven't yet, please make sure to go down and hit the subscribe button. If you guys do enjoy the video, please make sure to drop a like too. So typically, Palossand is a ground and ghost type Pokemon, which is actually a pretty cool typing because it does come with 3 immunities, which are normal, fighting, and electric. I mean, it does come with 5 weaknesses, which are actually pretty common weaknesses too, which are water, grass, ice, ghost, and dark. And yeah, that's the downside to having a ghost type Pokemon, is that you are weak to yourself. It's kind of like the same way with Dragon too, but either way, Palossand has to worry about ghost type Pokemon too. So that's part of the reason why Terastallizing it might actually be beneficial here. But either way, it does have a couple of resistances as well, which are rock and bug, as well as a 4x resistance to poison as well. Offensively, Palossand's stab moves actually do hit 7 different types for super effective damage, and some of them that are pretty hard hitters like fire and steel. So really, it's pretty beneficial to have these stab moves on Palossand. And you know you're going to have coverage against those types as well, especially ones like steel, which do seem to be pretty common nowadays too. And this really only looks to benefit us as we Terastallize, since we do get to keep our original stabs as well. When Terastallizing, of course you want to look at the defensive capabilities of the Pokemon, so I know a lot of people might not want to Terastallize Palossand because you don't want to lose 1, 2, or even all 3 of the immunities. However, that's not to say that Palossand isn't a great candidate for Terastallization. Since your opponent already knows that you have immunities, typically they're going to be sending out a Pokemon that's going to be able to hit you with other type moves too. So in this case, using the element of surprise is really going to benefit us here. So being able to Terastallize into the normal type, I think is really going to give us that element of surprise. As we've talked before, normal only has 1 weakness, which is to fighting. And Palossand's original typing means that it's immune to fighting, which means that you're really not going to have to worry about a fighting move going into you once you Terastallize in that first turn. I mean, of course, if they know that you're going to Terastallize into a normal type, maybe they'll kind of take that chance and roll the dice, but at the same time, typically speaking, they're not going to be doing that to you. Also, Palossand does have that weakness to ghost like we talked about, so if you do Terastallize into a normal type and your opponent ends up using a ghost type, I mean, there's that element of surprise right there. They're going to be using a move that's not going to affect you. Now, of course, you do end up losing those 3 immunities, like I said, to normal, fighting, and electric. However, going into a normal type, you do gain 1 immunity back, which is Ghost. And again, in this case, where you have a Pokemon that typically is weak to a Ghost type Pokemon, getting that immunity to Ghost is really only going to benefit you. Offensively, normal type moves don't hit anything for super effective damage, so it's not like you're getting a stab move that's going to be super effective to things. However, that's not to say that normal type moves aren't strong. I mean, one of the moves that we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is Hyper Beam, is a base 150 power attack. So, you think about the fact that you're adding a stab bonus to that, I mean, that's going to hit really hard. I mean, for the most part, normal type moves do hit every type for just normal effective damage. Of course, it's not very effective against steel or rock, and of course, it doesn't hit ghost. So, if you do see ghost or anything like that, make sure not to use that. And of course, I would advise you not to do that against steel or rock or anything like that. However, being able to have the ground type as a stab move that it ends up retaining, I think you'll be able to still deal with those with that stab move as opposed to using Hyper Beam or something. So really, you do have options and you do have a lot of good coverage here with a normal type Palossand. But really, this Terastallization will really just be for a defensive surprise. To be able to kind of not take super effective damage from a ghost move and be able to become immune to it, be able to, kind of not have that weakness to fighting right away and everything, and not have to worry about that going into you in the first turn. I think that element of surprise is going to be really important here, especially since Palossand is so slow. Being able to potentially make their first turn completely worthless will give Palossand an extra turn out there. I mean, it is already pretty bulky, so it will be out there for a little bit, but if you are able to waste 1 of their turns, again, that's really only going to be able to benefit you. Also, there is 1 move in Palossand's move pool that is super effective to fighting, so if you do only have that 1 weakness to worry about, then at least you do have some coverage for it. So we'll kind of get into this build right now, and so we can kind of talk about Palossand and what you might be able to see if you do want to make it competitive, especially with the normal Tera type. So taking a look at Palossand and its stats, I mean, the only thing that it really lacks in here is speed. I mean, its base stat is at 35, but that just means that Palossand is a perfect Pokemon for Trick Room. I mean, there aren't a ton of things that are going to outspeed 35 in Trick Room. I mean, there are some Pokemon, in between, 20 and 30 and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, there are a lot of Pokemon that won't outspeed that. Plus, even if you didn't have that on a Trick Room team, or you had it out there when Trick Room wasn't active, I mean, it has enough bulk to be able to withstand a good amount of attacks as well. I mean, its base HP is at 85, its defense is at 110, which is pretty amazing if you ask me. Plus, it does have an ability, which we'll get to, that actually beefs up your defense stat as well. And its special defense is at 75, which isn't incredible or anything like that. However, I think that's more than enough to be able to withstand some special attacks. In terms of attack, it is more of a special attacker, as you guys can tell, with the base at 100 for special and 75 for physical. The good thing about that, though, is that if you didn't want to have a nature where you were minus speed because you weren't going to use it for a Trick Room team, then at least you do have another stat that you could lower with the specific nature. So really, I mean, you could either go, obviously, minus in the speed if you did want to go with a Trick Room team, or if you want to play it safe and, don't want to put it on a Trick Room team or something, you could always go minus in attack. And of course, because it is a pretty good special attacker, I would definitely put it plus in the special attack. So this one I would go modest. I mean, again, you could always end up going with quiet, but for me, I think, at least in this case, because we don't necessarily know what type of team this would be on, I think going modest would probably be best for this. Also to increase its bulk, because again, one thing you don't have to really worry about here is speed, because it is a slow Pokemon. Upping its speed with EVs isn't really going to help you that much. And it might help you outspeed some other mons that are pretty slow, that don't have any investment in speed or anything like that. However, putting EVs in its speed just probably isn't the smartest thing. So the good thing about that is you can take those 252 and put that in the bulk with the HP. So I would definitely put 252 in the HP. At that point then, depending on what you think you're going to see more of, obviously, you could be training it up for the ladder, or you could be training it up for a specific matchup. So depending on what matchup you think you're going to see, I mean, you can either put some in defense or special defense. I definitely would want to put some in special attack. I mean, just for, I guess for this purpose, we'll just max it out in special attack as well, especially because it's modest. Obviously, since it is modest, putting a little less in EVs, it's still going to make it a really powerful Pokemon, but still not as strong as a max. But either way, we could do that. And with this, because special defense is lower, I'll put the 4 in special defense. So that really is kind of like a typical kind of max. Oh, hey, what do you know? It's the bulky special sweeper. Awesome. But yeah, so that's pretty much what you would see from like a 252, 252 for Palossand here. So you could always do this with Palossand. Again, it's great because it is kind of naturally bulky, and the fact that you don't have to invest EVs into speed means that you can put those all into HP. So you have even more bulk than what you would have if you ended up maxing out its speed. So I think that's a really positive thing here. And to look at its abilities as well here, I mean, honestly, you got 2 of them, and both of them are pretty darn good if you ask me. I mean, the first one, Water Compaction, basically if you get hit by a water move, which regular Palossand is weak against. However, if we did Tera it into a normal type Pokemon, we could get hit with a water move and it would just do neutral damage. So that could be a lot of fun to play with. But basically, if you do get hit by that water move, your defense goes up 2 stages. And that's incredible. With your base stat of defense already at 110, I mean, you're essentially going to be doubling it at that point. So you're going to already, a Pokemon that's already bulky is going to become even bulkier. Or if you want to go with its hidden ability, which is Sand Veil, basically anytime Sandstorm is active, the Pokemon's evasiveness is up 25%. So really, both these abilities are viable abilities to go with. I think both could be pretty cool. If you do end up going with like Sand Veil or something, I definitely think you need to put Tyranitar or another Pokemon that would set the Sandstorm on the team with you. I think Tyranitar is great because, again, it's another really strong Pokemon. Yeah, it's something that has a 4x weakness, but hey, just because something has a 4x weakness doesn't mean it's not strong or can't be effective. So I think Tyranitar or something would be really, really great to use here to be able to set the Sandstream. If you do end up going with a Palossand, that does have Sand Veil. So I think that's one really cool thing that you could do with it. But again, either way, you can go with either. Just depends on what kind of strategy you want to play with, and if you do want to have a Pokemon on your team that does set the Sandstorm. So if you don't have anyone that sets Sandstorm, really Water Compaction would be great here, because if you did end up having a Water Pokemon or something like that, you could always end up doing like a weak Water move into yourself and being able to up your defense 2 stages each time you hit. And again, if you do end up doing Terastallizing yourself into a normal type Pokemon, that Water move's not going to hit as much, because what was super effective is just now normal effective. So really, that could be a fun strategy to play with. So having Water Compaction, I think, would be a lot of fun. As for its moves now, I think that obviously I have 4 actual like attacks right now. Obviously, you can always put something like Protect on it. Another move that is really great for Palossand as well, which is great if you want to kind of up your bulk as well. Or if you had a really bulky Palossand, you could also put Shore Up on it. So what that does is it ends up healing your HP by a half. However, if you are in Sandstorm, it does it by 2/3. So again, if you ended up doing Sand Veil and you did have Tyranitar, which ended up sending the Sandstorm for you, you can end up doing Shore Up, and you can even heal yourself even more than just that half that you would do if the Sandstorm wasn't up. So that's another fun one to go with. So Shore Up, Protect, Rest is on it as well. So if you want to go with like a Chesto Berry and do Rest, you could always do that. Although I think in that case, being able to do Shore Up, not go to sleep, and not have to worry about putting a Chesto Berry on it would probably be the better way to go. But I mean, that's just another thing that you could do. But of the 4 moves that I think would be best on it in this case, obviously I think with original stab moves, I think Earth Power would definitely be the strongest one here. Plus, you do have that ability to potentially lower their special defense by 1 stage. And since Palossand is a special attacker, you're only benefiting yourself there. Also, as another stab move, you can go with Shadow Ball, which again is another move that could potentially lower your opponent's special defense by 1 stage. Now, this is where it kind of deviates from what you would normally do with a normal Palossand, because of course with it terastallizing into a normal type, you kind of need a normal type move on it. I mean, you can always put Terra Blast on it. I know that that's kind of the default, I guess here, default move for if you want to, end up putting a stab move on it after you Terastallize. However, if you do want to use a move that a Pokemon would already have on it, I think here for Palossand, Hyper Beam has to be the way to go. So if you look at all the different typings, obviously, if you go into normal, the only moves that it has that are special moves that are normal moves, really, again, are just Terra Blast and Hyper Beam. Obviously, if you wanted to make it a physical one, I mean, you could. However, again, with the difference between the physical and the special attack stats, I think trying to make it a physical attacker would just be a little too difficult. So really, you just have to choose between Terra Blast and Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam is almost twice the power. Granted, yeah, you can't move on the next turn. However, if you do want to wipe someone off the battlefield, and you don't think that you're going to be able to survive on the next turn after that, Hyper Beam might not be the worst way to go. So having that as your stab move on there, I think again is a really good way to go. And then also you can have Psychic on it too, which really is just a way to kind of cover yourself for when you do turn into a normal type Pokemon. Because again, the only real weakness that you're going to have is going to be fighting at that point. And what better way to take care of a fighting Pokemon than to use a Psychic move? So Psychic obviously is a great move, and of course, kind of like Earth Power and Shadow Ball, it gives you a chance to be able to lower your opponent's special defense by 1 stage, which again, only benefits Palossand here. So I think these would probably be the 4 like actual attack moves that you would be able to put on Palossand if you did end up making it a normal Terra type. So again, Psychic really there just for the coverage. Hyper Beam was there for the stab move as well after you Terra type. And then of course, Earth Power and Shadow Ball are ones that it retains after it Terra types. Looking forward to the different items that it can hold. I mean, there are a lot of different things that you could do. Obviously, if you wanted to end up putting like all 4 moves on it and not going with Shore Up or Protect or Rest or anything like that, you could always put the Assault Vest on it. That way you can always, again, up your special defense by 1.5. So your defense, which is already really bulky at 110, is already going to be high. So the special defense, if you have it at 75, and you don't put any other investment in it, obviously if you raise it by 50%, you're going to be over 100 as well. So you have a pretty bulky Pokemon there if you end up having the Assault Vest on it. Other than that, though, obviously you can end up putting, you can always put a Focus Sash on it. You can always put a Focus Sash on any Pokemon if you really are that terrified of ending up losing them. But again, with the bulk that Palossand has, I don't think that it's really needed. I definitely think Leftovers would probably be a better option at that point. Only because, again, with its bulk, it's going to be out there for quite some time. So being able to kind of heal up 1/16 after every turn is going to be nice. And again, if you do end up having Protect on it as well, you can always, if you want to heal up a little bit more, Protect on a turn. I mean, you don't have to worry about Dynamax now. So, taking damage after you hit Protect really isn't going to be that much of a worry. So you don't really have to worry about that. So Leftovers would be another good item. You can always do Life Orb as well. I think that's always a great item. But then the other one that I think would be kind of like a wild card one here, because you're Terastallizing into a normal type Pokemon, you can always put the Chople Berry on it, because that would half the damage that you would take from a super effective fighting move. Now, typically, a Pokemon will have more than one weakness, so you'll kind of have to choose which berry you'd want to put on it, because, you'll have to think about which one you're going to see the most. Obviously, back in Sword Shield, there were a couple Pokemon that had, I forget the name of the actual berry, but it was the one to prevent steel damage, or to have steel damage, because they were, really afraid of Zacian. And rightfully so, don't get me wrong, but, they had other weaknesses as well, but steel was there because it was the biggest threat that posed to them. But in this case, Palossand, after its Tera types, is only going to have one weakness, so why not have that one berry that, you're going to see super effective damage from? I mean, you're really not going to have to worry about it on that first turn, because, unless your opponent actually, predicts the fact that you're going to, Terastallize, and they know that you're going to be a normal type, but really, that's kind of a risky assumption to make. So, really, I think having that berry on it, you're not going to have to worry about it on that first turn. So, having it for the second or the third or the fourth turn, if there's a chance that, you're going to end up seeing that move out there, I think it's really nice to have on it. So, again, I would typically go for Leftovers or a Life Orb or something like that. But really, the Chople Berry is a good alternative as well. So for this one, really what we're going to do is, just for the heck of it, because, again, I really like Leftovers, we'll put Leftovers on it. Again, the one move that we're really missing here, because it got taken off for some reason, was Hyper Beam. So this really is kind of a pretty good build here for a Palossand that does have the normal Tera type. So that way, again, if you do end up Terastallizing it into the normal type, you do have Hyper Beam there for your additional stab move. You do have Psychic there to be able to cover for the different fighting types that you might see. And then you also have Earth Power and Shadow Ball as your original stabs. And again, because it is a special attacker, you do want to invest some in its special attack. And again, because it is a pretty bulky Pokemon, and you don't have to worry about investing anything in speed, you can put a whole heck of a lot more in HP as well. So that way it's going to be out there for a pretty long time. So this is our Palossand right here. I think this is one that would actually be a lot of fun to use, and one that we might end up using on a team once we're able to start on the ladder in December. So keep an eye out for this team, because this might be one that we do. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to drop a like, and we'll see you guys next time.